Hello everybody, welcome back to Speaking Spurs, me Kieran talking all things Tottenham. Not long left to go in the transfer window now. Tomorrow is the last day and things are starting to ramp up for Tottenham. That bloated squad very much trying to get players out of the door. There's a couple of players we're still trying to bring in, but look, let's go ahead and talk about it. So, lots of players that were linked with going out. Dier, Tanganga, Sanchez, Höjbjerg, Hugo Lloris, Sergio Reguilon. One outgoing that did happen today, Dane Scarlett, obviously not a permanent. Postecoglou's been talking very much over the last week or so that they would take their time and discuss things. He's a player that he very much likes and sees as a future player of Tottenham. He's gone out on loan to Ipswich Town. It's a very good move for him. Championship club. I think they're 6th in the Championship at the moment. Their manager has come out and already spoken highly of Dane Scarlett. Looking forward to getting to work with him. Hopefully he'll get some good minutes under his belt. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do. I thought maybe he was going to go out on loan to a League One club. So for him to go out on loan to a Championship club, that's a great step in the right direction. So yeah, wish him all the best. Also some really good news on that. The fact that he did sign a contract extension just before he went out on loan that will keep him at the club until 2027, which shows how much the club, are happy with his progress. So, good luck to you, Dane. All the best. We'll be following you closely in the Championship. Hopefully he sets it alight. Players that could be heading out the door. So Höjbjerg, at the beginning of the transfer window, linked with Atletico Madrid. They were struggling financially to try and get that deal over the line. That went really quiet. Then we saw Manchester United hold an interest. But I think it's looking more likely they're going to try and push for the move of Sofyan Amrabat, a player that we've been linked with for a couple of windows now. I'm surprised there's not more clubs in for Amrabat. But yeah, Höjbjerg to Manchester United has got a bit quiet. But however, it looks like Atletico Madrid have sparked the interest once again, as he is a target that Diego Simeone very much likes, wants to really strengthen the defensive midfield area. And Höjbjerg, a reliable player in that sense. He does a lot of the dirty work, the running about, the tackling, the interceptions. The stumbling block, obviously, a lot of Spanish clubs are having this problem at the moment, is financially. But it looks like if it's going to be anything, it will be a loan deal with hopefully an obligation to buy. And Spurs are trying to hold out for anything up to 40 million. Now, that's great. He's got 2 years left on his contract. He was never going to go cheap. We signed him for about, 15 million? So anything above that, great. And I think Spurs, we could take 25 million, really. I wouldn't be objecting to that, but I think it's coming down to a higher fee just because of who we're looking at a potential as a replacement, which we'll talk about in a sec. But I don't think necessarily Postecoglou is fussed either way whether he goes or not, as long as we can bring somebody else in. And it's a player that it was reported early on that Postecoglou was trying to get rid of and didn't fancy, but as we've seen in the Premier League, he's used his experience and his talent for seeing out a game as something to bring in. So I think Postecoglou in an ideal world wouldn't mind keeping him for that experience, but Höjbjerg's not going to sit around on the bench for the rest of the season to come in with 10-15 minutes to go to help see out a game. Also wants Champions League football. Why wouldn't you? So if he goes out the door, the player we're looking to bring in is Conor Gallagher. The only problem is Chelsea are holding out for 50 million for him. And I know he's obviously younger than Höjbjerg, but I don't really see the point in, if we can get Höjbjerg out for 40 million, then I suppose Conor Gallagher, you could try and do a deal of like 40 million and then 10 million in add-ons. But I don't know how I feel about forking out 50 million for Conor Gallagher when we already know Höjbjerg can do the job, whereas Gallagher's been a bit hit and miss. But however, Chelsea did reject a bid in the region of £40 million from West Ham earlier in the window, so we know they're looking out for the 50. Pochettino's also been using him. And I think ultimately Gallagher would like to stay and fight for his place, but if he has to go, he has to go. So that's one to keep an eye on. Fulham are also another club that have expressed an interest in Höjbjerg. So Palhinha, a player that we've been linked with in the past, and I'm kind of annoyed that we didn't go get him because what a player he's been in the Premier League. Picks up a lot of bookings, a bit like Romero, but he's a tough tackler, works really hard, scored a goal in the Premier League that we saw against the Arsenal. all that's happening at the moment is Fulham are waiting to find a replacement before they'll accept that Palhinha can go across to Bayern Munich. So Höjbjerg, somebody they've been looking at. Whether he's going to take that or not, I don't really know. That will come down to finances. And Höjbjerg ultimately, as we've said, wants Champions League football. Can't be offered that at Fulham. But first team football for the season, playing most games rather than sitting on the bench, you know, if that's the offer that comes in, maybe he takes it. Another player that could be going out the door, Sergio Reguilon. So he was obviously linked with Manchester United. That had gone a bit quiet because they were chasing Cucurella. It looks like that deal's not going to go ahead. So they're looking to loan Reguilon. And it was looking more and more likely it was going to happen, to the point where Tottenham had granted Reguilon permission to travel to Manchester to undergo a medical ahead of the 11 PM deadline on Friday. However, it's becoming a bit more complicated because Manchester United now want to enter a clause in it where they can terminate the deal early in January, and that's just down to the fact that Shaw and Malacia, if either of them come back from injury, obviously they're not going to want to pay out wages for Sergio Reguilon. So that one's kind of a bit up and down. Will it, won't it? Not too sure at the moment, but I'm sure if I was Tottenham, I would probably take the loan deal, even if there's the possibility they cancel it early, because it gives Reguilon a chance to play first team football and put himself in the shop window. And with 2 years left on his contract, like Höjbjerg, it's important for him to put himself in the shop window, and the best place to do that is at Manchester United right now, where he's guaranteed some game time in the top flight. They've got European football, so it kind of makes sense all round for him to really try and put himself in the shop window. Worst case scenario, it doesn't go well for him like it didn't at Atletico Madrid, but ultimately he's not playing at Spurs anyway, so get the wages off, even if it's only for a few months, and see if we can sell him. Spoken about that. Eric Dier. It's been a really up and down window for Eric Dier so far. He said that he wanted to stay and fight for his place at Tottenham. He's not been in any of the squads so far. Didn't even make the so-called B team for the cup game. Not even on the bench. Completely overlooked. So he faces the season on the sidelines because he wants to see out his contract at Tottenham. However, there's lots of clubs interested in signing him. We turned down a loan offer from Burnley earlier today, which I don't understand, because if he wants to see out his contract anyway but isn't going to play, surely it makes more sense just to get his wages off the books, or a bulk of his wages off the books for this season, knowing that we're going to have to, if he doesn't go anywhere, we pay his wages for the season and he still goes for free. So surely it just makes sense. Unless they're really convinced that somebody's going to come in with a concrete offer. And it also looks like the whole Bayern Munich thing was probably going to be a loan option as well. But I mean, with a loan option, surely you're going to get some money in for that. We saw with Jed Spence going to Leeds, we're getting £1 million for that. Eric Dier cost us £4 million. So with a loan deal, to get his wages off, even if you can get £1 million, you're only making a £3 million loss. And considering how good he was previously for us, and for England, I think we've had our money's worth out of Eric Dier. You know, really helped us cement ourselves in European competition, was a great servant, played across many positions for us. So, you know, job done. If he goes, he goes now. But, I mean, for me now, I don't know where he goes. There's several clubs in the Premier League that are looking for centre-backs that could come in for him. I mean, I don't know where he goes from here, but it's one of them that he's currently our 4th or 5th choice centre-half, and it's a real shame to see him just sit on the bench, not even the bench, sorry, to sit out of the squad for the whole season. He needs somewhere to go. I don't know who that's going to be. Fulham, Nottingham Forest. I'm sure there's clubs in the Premier League that would be willing to take him. But obviously, he's not a guy that shied away from being abroad. You know, he spent his early days when his family moved over to Portugal. He's been over there. He knows that league well. So he's not a guy that's scared of a challenge of going abroad. So we'll see what happens with that one. But very much up in the air. We've been holding further talks over the Johnson move. It's one of those annoying ones that's not progressing as much as we want, but I think we will get there. That's probably one that is going to end up happening late tomorrow, because quite rightly, Nottingham Forest are trying to hold out for every penny they can get. And they're trying, you know, they obviously turned down a big bid from Brentford. But however, they're obviously looking at other targets, which kind of gives us a clear run at him, and why it might actually push the price down a little bit. Japhet Tanganga, one of the centre-backs that could be going out the door. It's looking more and more likely that it could end up being a loan with an obligation to buy. A lot of clubs looking at him. Obviously, we spoke about the fact that Torino were looking at him in the last video. Augsburg in the Bundesliga seem to be the club spearheading at the moment. Permanent and loan deals are both being discussed with Spurs. The preference is for the former, permanent. So Spurs are obviously realising now Tanganga's not going to live up to that early hype that we had. A lot of that's coming down to the fact that he just can't get the regular game time because he's had a few injuries. You know, Jose Mourinho obviously brought him into the side, but the injuries have held him back and he's never really been able to push on because he comes in and he's playing catch up all the time. I think he overcommits a lot in games, which has resulted in the poor performances. But yeah, there's a possibility that Lyon are looking at Tanganga as well. He's a player that very much has been touted amongst lots and lots of clubs. So that's one that could get a little bit messy, but ultimately the good thing is there's a lot of interest and we might get a little bit more money out of the deal. We might be able to get the permanent because, you know, clubs are just wanting to win the signature there. Monaco, they've been pushing for Davinson Sanchez. Obviously, we spoke about previously that Rennes had a bid knocked back, and I think Sanchez ultimately would like to go to Monaco. He's worked under the manager before, but there's other clubs that do want Sanchez, so I don't think that one's a problem either. Monaco obviously want Adarabioyo, a player that we're looking at as well, but I think Fulham are playing hardball on that one, which is why Davinson Sanchez has now become a target. What else? Tanguy Ndombele, there seems to be quite a few clubs interested in him at the moment. One of them being Inter Milan, and they've held previous interest in Tanguy Ndombele. However, never managed to get him over the line. It's an interesting one. Obviously, there was talks that PSG were looking at him once again. I mean, it's one of those stories that's kind of been hot and cold throughout the last couple of days. Not really too sure what is going to happen with that one. And if you can see the colour changing throughout this video, it's because I'm constantly scrolling through for any updates that possibly could be coming in. London Rivals negotiating a deal with 28-year-old star. Honestly, there's stuff coming in constantly now. We're hitting that point where clubs are getting desperate to do stuff. Yeah, that's just about Höjbjerg once again, and Fulham ramping up their interest. I think they're desperate now to get somebody in for Polina because they know they're going to get good money for him. The Hugo Lloris one is quite interesting. Obviously, he's been turning down a lot of clubs, and I'm not sure why. I think it's because he probably wants to be first choice, and I don't think he's completely convinced with some of the clubs that that's going to be the case. I think what will end up happening is if he doesn't end up agreeing a move, then Tottenham will just release him anyway. But there's been talks, I don't know how concrete they are, but talks that he will actually consider retiring, which is crazy to think that the heights that he was at, you know, World Cup winner with France, been a great servant for us, and I know he's been a bit shaky recently, but it's just crazy to think that Hugo Lloris was first choice last season and all of a sudden could go from that to just retiring altogether. Absolutely crazy. No, more reports about the links with Conor Gallagher. More on Reguilon. It very much looks like it's just the same stories going over and over again. It's saying actually Reguilon has actually completed his medical. So obviously we gave him the permission to head to Manchester. So it looks like now he's completed his medical ahead of the loan. So now it's just going to come down to the break clause. and how much of the wages they will cover. But I do think this is one that will go through, just because if it doesn't go through, then it looks like Manchester United are really, really going to struggle to find somebody else, because the Cucurella deal has completely stalled. Reports are now coming in about Tanganga saying that he's close to agreeing the move to Augsburg, so that seems to be his preferred move. I'm assuming that what would have happened, his agent and himself are probably in contact with all the clubs, and it seems like Augsburg are going to be the club that are going to give him the most guaranteed game time, by the looks of it. And for him, I think that's the most important thing right now. He needs the game time. Going to another club and just sitting on the bench isn't going to cut it, which is why possibly Augsburg is the right move. They're probably the smaller of the clubs that are looking at him, which then puts less pressure on him. And if it's a loan deal, depending on whether there's an obligation or an option to buy, I mean, if there's not, and it is an option and they don't take it, if he plays well enough, that puts him in the shop window again. And obviously I've said before that his agent is Italian, and that's why we see a lot of links with Italian clubs right now. Back to Hugo Lloris, sorry, one of the clubs that were looking at him, I think, were at Napoli, but I don't understand that one, because they've actually got an abundance of goalkeepers of a decent quality, so I'm not too sure whether that's one that he will take up, sorry. What's Fabrizio Romano saying right now? Dun 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 dun. No, that's just more about Fulham. Lead. I think this is another one about Höjbjerg. It's going to be about Atletico Madrid. Just saying that, you know, it's looking like we could get the 40 million, the option to buy. So yeah, as far as I can see for right now. And just the other one that are in for Tanganga, it was Everton. However, I think part of the reason why he might avoid that one is because I don't know if he's going to want to be sitting in a relegation scrap at that club. It could be very messy. In January, there could be even more signings. So if it doesn't go well for him there, and I think if he was to go to Everton, it wouldn't go particularly well. They're a club that are going to concede a chunk of goals this season, and he's not going to want to be one of those players that are sitting there in that fight conceding the goals, because I think personally that will damage his reputation a little bit and will make it harder for a decent move afterwards. But yeah, looks like that's it. That is it for tonight. Expect a lot more movement to go on tomorrow. So the only one that has gone out the door today is Dane Scarlett with his move to Ipswich on loan. And then the other one that I didn't actually talk about the other day that I'm sure you'll all know, Troy Parrott. There wasn't much speak of him in pre-season or anything. He obviously went out on loan to Excelsior. So it actually looks like in a career trajectory at the moment, Dane Scarlett, despite the lack of going out on loan as much or at high-profile clubs as him, Dane Scarlett seems to have got himself the better move. However, I will say about Troy Parrott, the loans that he's had so far are very much in the mould of what we tried to do with Harry Kane. So he's had his League One move. He'd had the Championship move last year. Obviously, it was a season of struggle because ultimately he was at a team that weren't scoring many goals and were in a bit of a fight in the Championship. Whereas what that would have done for him would have toughened him up. So he's got the physical side of the game down now. We know that he scores goals at international level for Ireland. And going over to Excelsior, what will hopefully will happen, it's not as physical a league, but he should be able to work more on the technical side of the game and bang in a few goals for confidence. So I would fully expect next season, Troy Parrott would either be looking, if he's not quite ready, to move him on, or a loan move to a higher Championship club, or if not, a Premier League move, a bit like we did with Harry Kane when he had the Norwich move, which unfortunately didn't work out for him because of the injury that he picked up. But yeah, tomorrow I expect a lot more to be happening. I expect there to be a solution for Hugo Lloris, Eric Dier to either commit to being out of the squad for the season or to go somewhere. I personally think in that situation I would rather take a loan than risk him just sitting there wasting away, us paying his wages and him going for free at the end of the season. I think Daniel Levy now just has to stop being stubborn and just do what's best for us financially, which normally is the thing that he tries to do, but it seems like he's being stubborn. You know, we're finally getting offers for players we wanted out the door, Tanganga, Dier and Sanchez, and Daniel Levy's just like, boom, no thank you, boom, no way, batting him away, trying to get out every single million he can get out of these deals. And I think the problem with that is you're running the risk that teams are going to go and sign somebody else, or it's going to come down to the last day of the last few hours of the window, and clubs are going to sit there and go, right, well, we know we offered you this before, but actually we're going to offer you slightly less now. And that is the risk he runs. I know he likes to play those games, and I think maybe he gets a little bit of a kick out of it. But it's a dangerous game with players that could end up stuck at the club in the last years of their contract, just eating up wages. So who knows? So the work for us tomorrow is not only going to be getting those players out the club, we need the options ready to come in. So if all three of those centre-backs go, I would highly expect that we're going to bring somebody else in. I would hate to think that we'll be naive enough to just allow those to go out and not bring anyone else in. But however, it's Tottenham Hotspur. It's crazier things have happened. But on top of that, if Höjbjerg goes, then we need to bring someone in that looks like it might be Gallagher, and then the Brennan Johnson. So I think they're the three deals we're going to ultimately look at tomorrow. But I wouldn't put it past Spurs for a second to just throw a spanner in the works and get a random deal done we weren't expecting. And obviously we said earlier in the window, Paratici is somebody that's very much working with us in a consultory based role. So he will be giving us advice. No doubt he will be making phone calls on our behalf. So expect that there's probably a few different players already lined up as backups to some of these players. I don't like the backup option. I'd rather we just got our main targets. But I think maybe if Brennan Johnson doesn't happen, there is a chance we reignite an interest in maybe a Gift Orban, because scored a hat-trick in the Europa Conference League, if anybody noticed. And one of the other players that has done that, Harry Kane. So yeah, as far as I can see right now, that is all we're getting. I'll just check Sky Sports one more time. What have we got? What have we got? And then I promise I'll let you go. Just refresh the page one more time. No, that is it. So that is it for today. Everything we've spoken about. Nothing else has gone through whatsoever. Even if you go onto the main page. No. Excellent. So that's it for today. Yes. Reguilon closest to going out, followed by Tanganga. Scarlett already gone out. Deals being lined up for other players. Höjbjerg now a wanted man. Sanchez a wanted man. Tanganga being dragged all over Europe. Thanks for sticking around. I've been Kieran from Speaking Spurs. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment on anything we've spoken about today. And until tomorrow, come on you Spurs.